some of the healthiest parents we have had the privilege of working with in all these decades of doing this work are parents who are in recovery because they've done their work. They're still doing their work. There's a faithfulness to the work. And if every one of us as people in this world operated in the world from those basic principles, how different would the world be? Like if every day my baseline was, I need God, I need community, I struggle. Like those are foundational, healthy ways of living in the world.
Welcome to What We Really Want, conversations about connection. Settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of What We Really Want. I'm just here solo today, no Bobby, no Stacy, introducing an episode I'm really excited about. This is with David Thomas, and even as I say that name, many of you who are podcast listeners know exactly who I'm talking about. David is the co-host, along with Sissy Goff, of the incredibly popular podcast Raising Boys and Girls, which has over 250 episodes. And if I remember correctly, over 12 million downloads. And they're giving out unbelievably helpful advice, tools, and resources for parents who want to do the very best they can as they raise their kids. David is also the executive director of Daystar Counseling Ministries in Nashville, Tennessee. Daystar exclusively works with kids, adolescents, and families. They've been helping families for 30 years. They have a staff of about 20 humans and 6 therapy dogs who play an incredibly important role in the work. David and his partner, Sissy Goff, have just created a series of children's books based on some of the dogs. It's called the Daystar Dogs series. And this episode launches on May the 13th, which coincidentally is the release date of the first 2 of those books. We really encourage you to go wherever you buy your books to check those out. They are incredible at helping parents teach their kids about important emotions and experiences while they grow up. I'm calling this episode Recognize, Regulate, and Repair because of something that David talked about that they practice in their work at Daystar with clients every day. I love when he talks about how they equip parents to teach their kids how to recognize when something is happening or when a strong emotion's coming up, to learn how to settle when emotions are dysregulated, and to go back and make repair when in the midst of that dysregulation there's been conflict or damage done. That's so important not only for parents to teach their kids, but to model it, being willing to say they're sorry. Hey, mom and dad didn't do a great job with this, and we're sorry that we raised our voices with you. I mean, just teaching them what it's like to go make repair. In the absence of the ability or capacity to do these things, to recognize, regulate, and repair, I find that often I end up doing something that starts also with the letter R, which is react. And all the years that I've been in recovery, I've come to realize how many things I have done were reactive and very much driven by like a survival, self-care, desperation instinct, not feeling safe, not knowing how to move towards safety, just reacting. And I just think it's so important that in their work at Daystar and in the resources that they're putting out there, David and his team are naming these experiences and helping equip parents to have these skills, to know them and to pass them along to their kids. I just think you're going to really love this conversation. David is one of the most kind and encouraging people I've ever talked with, and that kindness and care he has for everyone comes through loud and clear in this conversation. I hope you love it. I hope you share it with a lot of people, because these are things that we all need to understand more deeply. So here it comes, episode 37 with David Thomas. It's called Recognize, Regulate, and Repair, and it's coming up right now. David Thomas, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. We had the great pleasure of getting to intersect and spend some time together in my city at one of my favorite spots. And it was a joy to not just share a beautiful evening with you, but to learn even more about the great work you're doing that I have had tremendous respect for. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of that evening.
Thanks for that encouragement, and thank you for being there that night. I'm excited to talk about what you've got going and just to have a really great conversation about that. But before we dive into it, what do you really want out of our conversation today?
Well, I may surprise you in what I'm about to say, and I mean this sincerely. What I really want is to talk as much about the work you do as the work I do, because I have experienced firsthand in a lot of decades of doing this work that I think the greatest gift that we as parents have to offer the kids we love is doing our own work. And I believe strongly in the wisdom of Richard Rohr's words, whatever we don't transform, we transfer. Yeah. And so to the degree that folks will open themselves up to, Greg, the great work that you're doing in this world, it makes the work I'm doing with kids 1,000 times easier. And so I'm as excited to talk about what you do as what I do, because the two go together well.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I was scrolling months ago on Facebook, and I came across a post on the Samson Society Facebook page. And this one said, "Pain moves through families until someone is willing to feel it." And it just made me think about that, the generational hot potato of trauma that just gets passed down and down and down because it hurts too much to hold on to it. So we unintentionally pass it on to the next generation. I mean, I know that's the work that you and I are both a part of, is helping to support people who are wanting to break those cycles.
Yes. Let's talk a lot about that.
Before we do that, though, help the people who listen to the podcast get to know you a little bit. I'd love to hear about just you, your personal life, your family, about your work with Daystar, raising boys and girls, just a lot of the things that people might know or might not know about David Thomas.
Thank you for asking. I am a proud son and husband and father, and grew up in the state of Tennessee. I've lived in Middle Tennessee my whole life, and I love where I live. I'm really thankful for this part of the world and to have raised my family here. My wife and I have been married we're about to have our 30th anniversary, and really incredibly grateful. Thank you. Incredibly grateful for her. And my wife is an elementary school teacher, and we have a unique story in that we have 3 children. Our firstborn is a girl, and about a year into my daughter's life, we got pregnant for the second time. We were incredibly grateful. We went midway through that pregnancy for an ultrasound, as you do, and walked into that appointment and said to the technician, "Okay, we're really old school. We don't want to know what we're having. We didn't know my daughter was a girl till the day she was born. So please make a note in our chart, but we'd like to be surprised." And Greg, I can still remember today where I was standing in that room as she was scanning my wife's belly and looked up with this huge smile and said, "I see 2 heads."
Whoa.
And my first thought was, why are you smiling if the baby has 2 heads? Like, that doesn't sound right to me.
We're going to make a lot of money off this 2-headed baby.
Oh my goodness, exactly. We were that shocked. We don't have a history of multiples in our family. My wife had not gained extra weight. Her counts weren't different. Like, none of the indicators that are there when you're carrying multiples were there for us. So here we are at the midway point finding this out for the first time. So I said to the technician at that point, "Okay, complete change of plans. We are so behind, we do need to know. So I'm gonna lay down in the bed next to my wife, and you tell us what we're having." And she said 2 boys. And so we would both say, I know I'm speaking for my wife, that those 3 human beings have been some of our greatest teachers in this world. I'm so incredibly grateful for what I have learned about myself, about relationships, about the heart of God through those 3 extraordinary human beings. And they are all young adults now. Yeah, they've all graduated from college, and it's so fun to see them figuring out their path in life and finding their people. My daughter got married this past year. One of my sons is getting married in June. So I'm a proud father-in-law too. And it's so fun to be a part of these young, I was about to say kids, they're not kids, young people's lives that are people I prayed for decades, and to meet them now and know them and have a relationship with them. So I feel like I have 5 kids now. And then we, after becoming empty nesters, made what seemed at the time like a really good decision. My wife has questioned this decision repeatedly over the last 7 months, got a puppy. And we had been the proud owners of a 12, almost 13-year-old yellow lab that we lost several years ago and loved dearly, and had been just long enough to have forgotten how much work it is to start over again. So we have a squirrely little 7-month, full of energy, highly extroverted, what feels like toddler in our house right now in this empty nest season. And in addition to those things being true about my personal life, in terms of my professional life, I have been practicing at this amazing place in Nashville called Daystar Counseling Ministries for the last almost 30 years. And we serve just the pediatric population. So all we do is work with kids, adolescents, and families. And we do the work a little different. We're in a house rather than an office. We have therapy dogs on staff. So it's a really unique, special place. And I work with a great team of folks and am currently the executive director there, and then have been given the great privilege out of that work to write some books. And I host a podcast with one of my dear friends and colleagues, and we've had some opportunities just to travel around to different parts of the country and talk about this relationship that I think is transformative and that I have seen so much evidence in 3 decades of this work, I think really can change us as people. And so it's a lot of fun to talk about the journey of parenting, and grateful we're going to get to do that some today in our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I was looking at Daystar's website a little bit before we started recording, and it's a substantial team that you've got. It looked like over 20 people and six canines who are on staff. Do the dogs and the role that they play in therapy, I mean, I'm sure that was a big influence in 2 new books that you and Sissy have coming out in May of 2025, right? The Daystar Dogs series that you guys have just started. Yes. We're going to talk more about that. But yeah, I'm sure that just what you experience with those dogs and your clients fed into that quite a bit.
You're 100% correct. And you're kind of mentioned that. And yes, we've all the humans on staff have laughed over the years that it's a great and humbling experience to go to work every day and be outpaced by a dog. But, we're all aware we're not the most sought after therapists in our practice. Like these dogs outpace us every day. But all joking aside, I have long thought, always believed, like if you get to go to work every day and work with kids and dogs, like you have a pretty good job. And I am super thankful for that job.
That's great. I was laughing when you were talking about the puppy at this season, just because I related to it so much. My wife and I are also empty nesters, and we've had a little Shih Tzu for about 6 years. We got him when he was 2, and now he's 8. And we kind of thought, well, that'll be the last dog that we have, because we're both in our 50s and just the whole starting over thing, right? But I also, for a long time, have been a runner. And over the years, a lot of my friends have gotten Vizslas, which are those beautiful kind of, copper brown dogs that you see people running with a lot. They kind of look like Weimaraners. And I was just, apparently I'd said it a whole bunch of times to my wife, Stacy, gosh, I would love to have a Weimaraner. And so 2 Christmases ago, she surprised me by getting me a Vizsla puppy. And so, I've got a little running buddy. And I'm like, golly, I can't imagine not having Danny. And at the same time, it's like, did we have any idea what we're getting ourselves into? Because those Vizslas, I mean, they are energy just with fur. It's crazy.
It is. And my wife and I have laughed, like she will periodically just be laying on the floor in the den and look up at both of us. And my wife will say, do you think she's thinking, I really should have landed with a family with small children? You two sit a lot. So much energy.
I have become, the older I get, more and more convinced that people don't deserve dogs. I mean, they're so much better than we are.
Aren't they? Aren't they? That's the absolute truth. We are just fortunate to get to be in relationship with them.
Yeah. I say that half kidding, but half serious too. I just, the unconditional love and connection that dogs give is just precious. That's got to be one of the best things about having them as part of your practice at Daystar.
Yeah. It's the absolute truth. Unconditional love and forgiveness. I'm like, we can learn so much about forgiveness from being in relationship with dogs too. They don't hold grudges.
Yeah.
They just move forward. So it's extraordinary. I love that you and I share that.
David, I want to get into a little bit of what we discussed over email. When I look at some of the books that you've written and I look at some of the topics of raising boys and girls episodes, and by the way, y'all have over 250 episodes now, and it's a hugely popular podcast. And looking over some of the episodes and looking over some of the books that you've written, earlier today I was just looking at the title, Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. and then the workbook that goes along with that, the Strong and Smart workbook, the thought came to me, I'm very aware that our ability to connect with other people as adults, AKA to attach, initially comes from our caregivers. And, usually that's our parents or at least one of them. What are some of the most important, maybe the super important things you would want parents to understand about their role just in shaping their kids' ability to be able to show up healthy in relationships as they're growing up?
What a great question. What an important question too. And, I would first say we talk a lot on the podcast about how kids learn more from observation than information. They learn way more from watching us than anything else. I love Robert Fulghum, who wrote All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, once said years ago, don't worry that kids aren't listening. Worry that they're always watching. Like that is such a great reminder for every one of us. And that could feel like an overwhelming responsibility, or it could feel like an incredible privilege. Like how much learning can happen just when we do life together, when we sit around the table together and talk about our days, which families do every day. How could I be narrating my experience in an age-appropriate way to where all that good learning is happening? We're just sitting around the dinner table. My kids are getting to sit front row and learn about this is what it looks like to have an emotional life, and that we are created as emotional beings by God. And our journey is just to learn to, I talk about name and navigate over and over, just to name and navigate our experience. And you were so kind to mention Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. In that book, the book is really built around what I call the 3 R's, which are something we teach every day in our work at Daystar. And it's recognize, regulate, and repair. And recognize is just to, notice and pay attention to the signs and signals I'm getting when I have an emotional response. And that's different for every one of us. And how can I pay attention to those and learn to name my feelings well out of that? Regulate is just to employ calming and coping strategies when the nervous system goes into a heightened state of arousal. So with kids, we talk about it. How do I get from stress to settled or chaos to calm? And then repair is just to take ownership and do any needed relational work. And I think the 3 R's are really just good human work, that if kids could watch that through connection and relationship with their parents, if they could experience that, if they could spend the first 18 years of their life getting to watch repair happen between parent to child, and practicing repair, how game-changing a skill set that would be. But how many adults you and I know that grew up in homes where you never heard your parents say, I'm sorry. You didn't have the opportunity to watch healthy conflict happen and parents moving toward resolution, parents practicing repair. So those 3 R's are what I introduce in the book and what I want to simply invite more families into, using, as you wisely said in the question, just the gift of relationship and connection as the foundation for where I think the best stuff happens for kids. Yeah.
And it's really important to go back to the regulate part of that. I know that one really helpful thing that I heard from Adam Young on the Place We Find Ourselves podcast is, from the very beginning, the big 6 that he talks about all the time, the big 6 things that kids need from their parents, like attunement, responsiveness, ability to handle tough emotions, many, many things. Repair, willingness to make repair is one of them. The ability to regulate their arousal, their emotions. And he's really very direct in saying children cannot do that by themselves. Like, children don't possess the skills to regulate their own emotions. If they're bouncing off the walls, they need mom or dad to say, hey, buddy, let me hold you in my lap and settle, and let me read you something. And they can just feel the calm just from that. Or if they're lethargic, hey, let's go outside and let's throw the Frisbee. It's that example, and we're not even necessarily teaching them a verbal lesson, but we're helping them to see, we're training them that when you feel sluggish, get up and move. When you feel intense, then this is what it's like to sit and let that settle. Kids can't do that by themselves. Right. But I know one thing from my own experience and all the people that we work with in recovery is I'm going to find a way to simulate that. And, so whether that is a toddler sucking their thumb or a pre-adolescent using masturbation to do either one of those things, it can bring you up or it can bring you down, then we're going to find a strategy that's going to wind up down the road being very, very harmful because we didn't have that investment. And so it's just absolutely so critical that as parents, we see this is a limited stewardship opportunity that we have, and we've got to redeem the time.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
How have things gotten so out of control? How did something that didn't seem like such a big deal at first completely take over? Porn and sex addiction are destroying your life and killing your relationships. You know you can't keep going on like this, keeping secrets and telling lies. Something has to change. But how? Most men who struggle with unwanted or addictive sexual behavior have tried to fix it on their own. But sex addiction is powerful and complicated. Recovery is possible, but it isn't easy. It requires us to focus on more than just behavior. It requires us to look at our whole lives and the parts of our stories that contribute to addiction. If you're ready to find freedom, maybe it's time for you to get to the roots. The Roots Retreat is a 4-day therapeutic and spiritual intensive. You'll work with therapists and coaches who specialize in sex addiction and recovery. You'll learn how to take healthy ownership of your behavior. You'll discover how your life experiences set the stage for addiction to develop. You'll see how God factors into your struggle, and you'll learn effective tools for ongoing recovery after the retreat. If you're ready to stop trying what doesn't work, if you're ready to experience real hope, healing, and change, let's get to the roots.
Visit awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat or click the Roots Retreat link in show notes.
Well, and I would say two things to your wisdom. I would say it's why it's no surprise to you or to me that males lead the statistics with infidelity, internet pornography, substance abuse, suicide, the common denominator in each of those. We lead in diseases of despair. And the common denominator being a male's attempt to try to numb out or shut down whatever it is I'm feeling, as opposed to healthy strategies for soothing, which is what regulation is. And to your great wisdom, I'm always wanting to remind parents of that, and I'm so grateful we're talking about it, that those are learned and practiced skills. We talk about it like bike riding. Kids don't instinctively know how to do that, and we've got to labor for a long time in the training wheel space, and then once we take the training wheels off, I'm still supporting. I'm holding the handlebars while you're getting down that clunky motion of pedaling, and then even there, I'm holding your back as you're trying to get the wobbly motion of both, and then I'm cheering you on while you're riding in the cul-de-sac. That the journey from co-regulation to self-regulation is a long journey, and there's a lot of practice within that before kids are, to stay with that analogy, successfully riding their bikes on their own, which we want them to be able to do as they launch into adulthood. But, I've laughed with a lot of parents how many kids, I think, over the course of their growing up, how many of us, may have grown up with having an adult saying to us that classic phrase of just, you need to calm down. And it always makes me kind of laugh that we yell calm down a lot. I don't know how helpful that is, but also assuming that kids would instinctively know how to do that.
Right.
Like I jokingly say with parents, and when I teach on regulation, that's kind of the equivalent of you looking at me and yelling, you need to play the cello. Play the cello. You can yell that at me all day long, but if you don't teach me how to hold the cello, how to play the cello, and then I don't practice the cello, you can keep saying it over and over, but I don't know the mechanics of that. And so
you getting more intense isn't going to teach me how to do it.
Not at all. Not at all. Just floods my brain and body and makes it harder to learn new skills. So I want to invite parents into seeing these emotional skills no different than the way we teach the cognitive skills of math and reading and those sorts of things. It's a lot of working with kids. It's a lot of being right beside them. It's a lot of healthy modeling and knowing that this isn't something we turn around in 6 minutes, 6 days, or even 6 weeks. This is the long game of teaching these foundational skills.
So when you're working with families in your practice and you're trying to encourage and, help these parents envision what changes they could move toward to help provide for their kids differently or in more ways than they have to this point. Do you more often experience parents who are resistant / unwilling to do that, or that they really, really want to, but they just don't even know how to do it?
Yeah, I think it's more of the second. I really do. Now, I certainly have seen a number of parents in the years of my work where the first is true and there's some kind of barrier in place that is getting in the way, that keeps them from doing their own work. But I would say, I think particularly this generation of parents, they're deeply curious and even I would argue more well-versed in terms of emotional vocabulary, but not always knowing how to teach those skills. And again, often because we're flying blind. We didn't have a roadmap. We didn't have the opportunity to sit front row and see this in the homes we grew up in. There's a desire, but not a clear plan.
Well, talk more about that if you would, because I was thinking about that. I mean, how do we, when you use the example of, somebody screaming at you, David, play the cello, play the cello. I mean, what if we're the ones who are screaming at ourselves, be a better parent, be a more attuned parent, but we don't know how to do it because we didn't receive it. So yes. If there's a parent who knows that there's a gap between how they're showing up and how they want to show up, and they want to do better, and yet this, the educating that you're trying to do, the encouragement, the invitations that you're giving, it's hard for them. Like, how does a parent who knows they need to pass something along that they didn't have bestowed upon them, how do they close that gap? How do they make that change? Because that's a lot. I mean, that's kind of what Carlford Broderick talked about when he was describing the transitional character, as somebody who's going to metabolize the poison and not pass it along, but not only not do the negative, but to somehow find a way to learn about the positives that weren't bestowed and begin that as the new downstream.
Yes. You were kind a few minutes ago to mention a workbook that I wrote for elementary age boys called Strong and Smart. Mm-hmm. And I had 6 to 12-year-old boys in mind when I wrote that. My dear friend and colleague that I host the podcast with, Sissy Goff, wrote a great workbook. It's a parallel resource for girls called Braver, Stronger, Smarter. And we're teaching just foundational emotional skills in those workbooks. And I ran into a mom in the Charlotte airport recently, and she said, David, I bought a copy of your workbook for my 7-year-old son, but quite honestly, I'm mostly using it with my 37-year-old husband. And I laughed with her about that declaration. But what I loved and what I've had a lot of dads say to me is, David, I've done the workbook with my son and said out loud repeatedly, like, buddy, I didn't get these things down when I was your age. And it's gotten in the way of a lot of life for me. And I'm so excited to be learning beside you. And I think, what a gift if more kids could hear that from their parents. Like, I didn't learn these things growing up, and I'm excited to learn with you. And we're going to travel through this workbook together. I think it's a great, I'm not saying my resource is the only resource, but finding a resource that allows you to be as equipped and skilled as possible so that you can take the journey you want to take with the kids you love. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where it has to start. And I think there's something so good about more kids hearing their parents say, I'm growing with you. I think this journey of parenting, I'm fully convinced, is as much about our growth and transformation as it is our kids.
But see, that doesn't come naturally. That feels counterintuitive to a lot of parents, because if they grew up with parents who never admitted wrong, who never made repair, because they grew up with parents who never admitted wrong or sought to make repair, then there's this belief that if I admit that I'm wrong, then I'm going to lose respect in their eyes. They're going to think less of me. And yet we know, practically speaking, that the opposite is true, right? So, I mean,
Absolutely.
Is that some of the encouragement that you probably frequently have the opportunity to give to parents who are afraid that if they are letting their kids know about their imperfections, that it's going to go in a bad direction, but actually that increases security in their kids, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. And even, Greg, to the important life-giving, soul-strengthening work that you're doing, I will go a step further and encourage parents. I do it every day in my practice. Talk with your kids openly about what you're doing that's helping. Like, if if you're in counseling, talk about how helpful that is. If you took a walk with a friend and were vulnerable and they shared a challenge with you, talk about that. If you go to meetings, talk about that. There's an age-appropriate way that we can talk about that work. I can't begin to tell you how many kids under the roof of the Daystar house over the years have asked one of us, will you tell my mom and dad to go meet with their person? Like there's this sense of something's going on around me. It doesn't feel good. And I can start to feel responsible for that. But if you'll go meet with their person, then they're in charge of making sure you two work through your conflict. And so I want us, that's part of narrating our experience in healthy, helpful ways that takes that sense of responsibility off kids and prepares them for what you and I know to be true, which is that is a good, healthy way to live. Is that I'm doing my own work, that when my marriage hits a hard place, I get an outside perspective. We weren't designed to be our own doctors. I can't quarterback my own health, not my physical health, not my emotional health, not my spiritual health. Like I need outside input. And so if we narrate that for kids, there's this sense of this is what it looks like to be a healthy grown-up in this world.
Yeah. And for people that are part of our Awaken community who are pursuing 12-step work as a part of their healing, their recovery, when they get to the point of making their amends list and actually making amends, seeking restoration in those relationships of the people who they've harmed, right after that in step 10 is we continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. And that's not just for adult-to-adult relationships. I mean, we can do that in our families, and it strengthens. That's the thing about rupture and repair that's been so impactful to me is that if you repair a rupture, the relationship actually is stronger than, in many cases, than before the rupture even took place. It's kind of like the whole principle of properly setting a broken bone, and that you can end up with a stronger limb because it was treated properly. We can't say that enough times because it's not intuitive, but it's true.
Well, and can I say two things to that? I've gone on record as saying, I'm going to say it repeatedly because it's been true. My colleagues and I talk often about this, that some of the healthiest parents we have had the privilege of working with in all these decades of doing this work are parents who are in recovery because they've done their work. They're still doing their work. There's a faithfulness to the work. And the second thing I would say is that if every one of us as people in this world operated in the world from those basic principles, how different would the world be? Like if every day my baseline was, I need God, I need community, I struggle. Like those are foundational, healthy ways of living in the world. And so I think to everything you're saying, I just want so desperately, and given any opportunity, to say what an advocate I am of the work you do and how I have seen it generate some of the healthiest parents who I think, to the conversation you and I are sharing, have the most to offer the kids they love and are preparing them to live in a fallen world full of struggle.
Yeah.
I think about the wisdom of John 16, like in this world, expect trouble.
Yeah.
Like we don't do a great job of always messaging that to the kids and adolescents that we love, that it's hard to live this side of heaven. And there are a lot of opportunities for my heart to get broken and relationships to get complicated and all the things that come. And again, right back to the 3 R's, how am I building the skills to navigate in this broken, hard world that's full of struggle?
And I think that the gift that parents, in doing what you're describing right now, the benefit that they can give to their kids is at least twofold, because in doing that and living that way, there will be some measure of prevention. There will be some measure of, we don't want our kids to have to go through some of the pain that we went through. And that's, of course we don't. And in living that kind of honest, then we trust that God's going to cause some of that preventative stuff to happen.
Absolutely.
But also we're teaching them how to respond when we do mess up. And I think about just the simplicity of like even 1 John 2:1, where John says, my children, I write these things to you so that you may not sin, comma. So there's the first, like, my hope is that you're not going to end up in this place in the first place, comma. But when we do sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. Yes. And so it's like the standard doesn't change, and we want our kids to grow up healthy, and we want them to make good choices. And by sharing some of our failures, we hope that the net is going to be they don't fail in all the same ways that we did. But we also can show them, but I failed, and this is how I healed, and I accepted grace, and you can too. And that puts us in the position as parents of always being the place that they know they can come back to and tag safe.
Yes. And these are the people around me who help me find my way back to truth that I forget sometimes, like modeling that, not just talking about that. And, Greg, one of the many other reasons I'm so grateful for the work you do is I talk a lot about how often over the years I've asked kids of different ages this question, like, tell me this, who are some of your mom's closest friends? And found with great consistency that most kids of many ages can answer that question right away. They can name at least one or two people, if not more. And then they sometimes even talk in detail, like, my mom takes a trip every year with her college friends, or she's in a small group. But if I flip the question and say, who are some of your dad's closest people? I can't tell you how many kids and adolescents have paused. Or we'll answer this way. Well, my dad works with, they'll speak to, and sometimes those are friends as well, but I really want to challenge any man listening. Like, I think we've got a good bit of catch up to do in messaging and modeling and narrating the importance of us having healthy male friendships, and why I think that's one of the reasons we lead those scary statistics. And that is, again, not only something we need for our own well-being, but something so informative for the kids we love, particularly the boys we're parenting, that they need to see the importance of those friendships, how we prioritize them. Hearing us tell stories. My kids were home over Christmas in their 20s, and I'm still doing it. Like, I went on a walk with Carter this morning. Can I tell you a question he asked me that I'm still thinking about? So I think don't stop doing that at any point. That just, again, continues. This is a healthy way to live in the world. We all need it. None of us are exempt.
That's so important what you just said. And we just recently had an episode where one of your colleagues, another therapist from Nashville named Blake Roberts, was our guest, and he was talking about the epidemic of male loneliness. And I mean, just the inability of kids to name any of their dad's close friends, largely because their dad doesn't have any close friends.
Yes.
Again, there's things that we can't over talk about, and I think that's one of them too. I appreciate you mentioning that.
I agree. I love Blake's work. I'm so thankful you all had that conversation.
Well, hey, let me shift gears with the time that we have left, because I know that you've got a lot of conversations lined up to talk about something new and exciting that you've got coming out. We talked earlier about Daystar Dogs. There's a whole kids book series that you and Sissy have been working on, and the first two books are coming out in May. Tell us about Owen and Lucy.
You're so kind to ask. We're really excited. We've never written children's books before, so this is new territory, but dreamed about doing this for a long time. And Greg, when I was talking a few minutes ago about the workbooks for kids 6 to 12, as soon as we finished those, the next question we were asking ourselves and each other was, how could we create some resources for kids even younger than 6? Because to the conversation you and I are sharing, the earlier we can get started, the earlier parents feel like they know how to have some of these conversations, and we can begin laying this foundation, all the better. So that was the mission, was just to expand the work and to make it easier for parents. So we have 4 books currently in the Daystar Dog series, and they're based on one of the actual dogs who has worked or is currently working at the Daystar office, and something they've learned from their work with kids, and something they've learned, a way they've grown that could be helpful to kids as they're growing and learning. And so it was so much fun to write these, to see the illustrations tell the story we wanted to tell as well, and to think about all the ways that parents could be having conversations with kids about these important principles you and I are talking around. And so beyond just telling an important story, we really wanted to arm parents with tools. So every book has conversation starters, questions parents can ask kids at the end of the book. And every book has a different tool that we believe helps teach the 3 R's. So the Owen book that was based on the lab that I mentioned earlier that we lost several years ago, Owen has a feelings chart, and it's dog expressions of each feeling that parents could use as a visual tool. And then Lucy's book has a perspective scales so that kids can learn to rank their emotions on a 1 to 10 scale and start to figure out what's a 2 event in life and what's a 10 event in life. And so each book is going to arm families with a different tool and hopefully some really good questions and ways to make these books more meaningful in terms of their interactions.
Yeah, I love that so much. I was looking through the press release because you guys have some shots of the feelings chart and then the thermometer chart that you were just talking about from the 2 books. And, there's 12 pictures of Owen's face on the feelings chart, along with words like hopeful, grateful, happy, proud, brave. But then it gets into some of the more difficult ones: afraid, guilty, sad, jealous, mad, frustrated, confused. And just there's a little bit of a tweak to how his face looks in all of those things. And I mean, my goodness, this is a book on resilience. And that struck me that, that's a word when we're talking about kids that can mean 2 very different things. I mean,
yes,
I've thought about how often when a couple are going through a divorce and people say, well, I'm so worried about the kids, and the reaction or the response, well, hey, they'll be okay because kids are resilient. And like often they're not, though. And what's meant by that first kind of resilience is, well, this isn't going to kill them. They're going to survive this. But that's not the kind of resilience you're talking about in the book, is it?
No, not at all. And I think you're right. We can sometimes make that big declaration at the expense of reminding ourselves that kids are really vulnerable. And that can be a pass to attending to some fears that we may have. But yes, really within the story of Owen's book, wanting to encourage kids that I think God made them in a way that they can do hard things. And hard things make us feel scared sometimes. And what does it look like to be brave in the midst of fear? It's not diminishing or eliminating the fear, but it's moving forward in the midst of fear and naming that fear. Again, even Owen's expressions at the end of the book are part of that, teaching that first R of recognize. And so how could I get really dialed into what I'm feeling that might get in the way of me trying hard things or doing hard things in the world? Because we talk about a definition we use a lot with kids and adolescents in our work when we talk about worry and anxiety is that it's an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of myself. So the problem or the situation feels too big and I feel too small. And how could we as parents not be feeding and fueling that definition sometimes by moving toward what the research would say is most instinctive escape and avoidance? Like, I see my kid struggling and I want to pull them right out, as opposed to how could I speak this truth into them? Like, resilience is not something you have to muster up. Like, God put that in you. He gave you the ability to do hard things. But we have to practice in that space. Like, we don't just wake up feeling courageous. And so what does it look like to live into all those truths is what we're hoping these books accomplish. And I would say the other thing that felt so important is I love the wisdom of the old Frederick Douglass quote that says, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And I think to the conversation you and I are sharing, these books feel like tools that help build strong children. And so that, again, to everything you and I are talking about, how could we be doing as much preventative work on the front side to lay this foundation that is our kids live into the realities you and I have been naming, that they, to the great wise words that I love and I'm going to borrow from the recovery movement, can deal with life on life's terms.
Yeah.
As opposed to just folding when life throws me life. So it's, again, where there are not enough ways, there are not enough opportunities for me to champion the work you're doing and how life-giving and soul-strengthening I think it is.
Well, I can tell you, David, that hearing you talk about resilience as it relates to this book and what you're trying to help communicate, not just to the kids, but to their parents, it's striking me because I began to learn about the type of resilience you're talking about in my late 30s, in the midst of crawling out of a crater when my life blew up. And I'm so grateful to have gotten to start learning it then. But, oh, how much better to be a kid today who's beginning to learn this before things have gone into the ditch or before the bomb has gone off. Because we can't keep bombs from going off in our lives. But what we can do is what if down the road, one of these kids now who reads this book has something happens, and now they're going back to something that they already knew. It's not brand new. They're not reinventing the wheel. And so whether it's resilience or courage, which is, Lucy Learns to Be Brave, or, the 2 books you have coming out later in the year on self-control and on jealousy, what a gift to be helping equip parents to be able to teach these important skills and characteristics to their kids, and to not continue to be at a deficit of knowing how to do it. I'm so grateful that you guys have done this.
Well, you're incredibly kind to say it. It's wanting to, as we keep going back to, just preparing kids for the experiences of being human. I love when Dr. Susan David, who wrote Emotional Agility, said, discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Like, we can't avoid it. We're all going to experience it. I had it happen yesterday. I felt jealous yesterday. So it's like, how do I equip the kids that are in my care to begin to develop the skills and name the feelings when they have these normal human experiences, when they bump up against their own version of discomfort, so that they do feel like I can name and navigate that. I've got the skills in place. I've been practicing them with my mom and dad. I've been watching them on my mom and dad, so that when I hit up against these different moments in life, I feel equipped and capable, because I am so grieved to continue to hear a version of the same story. And I know you hear it over and over and over, of just college-age young men, young adult men who are dying by overdose and suicide, just these diseases of despair repeatedly. And I certainly heard these stories in the beginning of my work 30 years ago, never at the rate I've heard them right now. In fact, when I was doing the research for Raising Emotionally Strong Boys, the stat I came across is that 1 male dies by suicide globally every minute of every day. Like, I could not even believe, I had to read it 10 times. Like, that surely cannot be true, but across the globe. And it just is something I can barely make sense of, but, and could start to experience a lot of just despair and hopelessness myself. But then this sense of hope rises up in me of, okay, you do everything you know to do.
That's right.
On your watch, during this time, that can be a part of pushing against that in some way. And it's where this preventative work feels so hopeful to me, to think about the difference that it could make, and the redemptive work that you are doing in this world, so that these extraordinary parents can move through the brokenness, experience and taste the redemption that they can then offer to their kids, and then be, to what you and I shared a few minutes ago, the healthiest versions of themselves to pass down to the next generation.
When you think about the magnitude of the task and what we're facing and what we're working against, I often say that with the work that we're doing, and I know you could probably relate to this, it feels like you're standing in front of a tsunami with a hairdryer, just trying to push it back. But what else are you going to do? We can say, well, the little bit that I can contribute is not going to do anything. Well, it's going to do something. And if everyone does a little something, God empowers it. Each person can't change the entire world, but we can change the world that's right around us. And thank you for, the part that you guys are doing in equipping people to change their world.
Well, right back at you, my brother. I'm so grateful to be on a parallel journey with you.
Thank you for saying that and being so kind to me as well. I know you've got another one of these conversations coming, so I got to let you go. But this hour has flown by. I'm so grateful for the chance to talk. Can't wait for the next time we can see each other in person, hopefully up there in Nashville.
I hope it's over Lady Bird Tacos. That's what I hope. Well, I'll have it in your city or mine, wherever.
I think there's a better than average chance that'll probably be where it is. So.
I'd love that.
David Thomas, thanks so much for being with us. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.